Hello and welcome to Toto Football. I cover everything soccer. The only thing off limits is past the shoulder. What if I told you there was a story about the battle of good and evil? That underneath this battle was a battle of philosophy for the soul. And what if I told you it wasn't the Bible or a sequel to any Star Wars movie that you'd seen? Would you believe me? We actually do have a book like that I want to talk about today called The Barcelona Inheritance by Jonathan Wilson. And I know there's some dramatic part of what I just said as far as the battle for good and evil. But in this book, Jonathan Wilson really does lay out that what happened in soccer for the past 10 years was a battle of philosophy. There was a side that he took in this book. It's very obvious on which philosophy side point he started on, but there really were good guys and bad guys in this book as far as who was on what side of the philosophy. As you could probably guess, he was on the side of Barcelona, what we've seen, fast play, possession-based football, Pep Guardiola, all these things. And we do have a pantomime villain in Mourinho. And he lays this out, and it's just a fantastic read. I'll go ahead and say that. An excerpt from the book where Wilson is quoting Albert Camus. Albert Camus has said about Amsterdam, "For centuries, pipe smokers have been watching the same rain fall into the same canal." Now, the reason that Wilson talks about Camus in this quote right here is to say that before the Cultural Revolution in the 60s, Amsterdam had been the same. It had done nothing different. But then when the Cultural Revolution happened across the world, things changed. And he really wants to point out that the sociological things that were changing affected the people. Namely, the person he's pointing out is Johan Cruyff. Now, many people will know who Johan Cruyff is. If you don't know, he is the philosophical father of Pep Guardiola. In this book, Wilson takes a lot of time to talk about Johan and where he was as a player, what shaped him as a player. Some interlinked people with that are Rinus Michels, which he goes into a little bit of detail in this book. Not quite as much as other books he's written. But it really sets up, the link between Pep Guardiola, Johan Cruyff, and as we'll see, a lot of other players. Some of the players that are present today that are very much in a big part of the big teams in soccer, such as Pep Guardiola, we've mentioned, Luis Enrique, who coached Barcelona in Spain, Ronald Koeman, who is currently, at the time of recording this, coaching Barcelona, Louis van Gaal, Mourinho, we all know Mourinho. And then, like I mentioned, Rinus Michels, Johan Cruyff, Frank Rijkaard, and Bobby Robson. And the most fascinating part of this story is I knew all of these people. I knew they were important, but I didn't know them past the fact that they were all individuals. What I came to find out, and what Jonathan Wilson fantastically lays out, is how intertwined all of their histories are, and they would be nothing without each other, whether they were supporters of each other or they were competitors of each other. What would Lionel Messi be without Cristiano Ronaldo, and vice versa? Jonathan Wilson's in-depth research not only applies to what's happening on the field, what is happening behind the scenes at these clubs. We may have seen the big games. We may have seen the El Clasicos, the scuffles, the media excerpts from the coaches. If you haven't, I absolutely recommend you read this book and then go back and watch some of those El Clasicos from 2010, 2012 era. If nothing else, for the Mourinho eye poke. If you don't know what that is, look it up on YouTube. It is fantastic, and I can remember watching these games and just being enthralled and having debates with my friends about, who was good and who was bad and what we liked and what we wanted to emulate when we went out and played. But Jonathan Wilson gives you that subtext. What was happening behind the scenes that made everything happen on the field? That is something that we don't often think about as fans. We see an hour and a half game. You get the pregame, you get the postgame, you get somebody's opinion who doesn't even know anything. But what Jonathan Wilson does is lay out what was happening. What had happened. What do we forget about that time? What were the board of directors doing? Who was having a feud with who? Other issues like that. But it also doesn't just stop at Barcelona. He has great insight on other teams like Ajax. We know through the years, Ajax and Barcelona have this amazing link. And he will lay that out in the book. Say that, Barcelona would be nothing without Ajax and maybe vice versa. At least philosophically, Barcelona may not be the club that we know today if they had not had Ajax, because that's where a lot of the philosophy flowed from. Other teams, include PSV, Real Madrid, Inter Milan, Chelsea. So it's not just about Barcelona if you were coming to read a book about Barcelona, but it does weigh heavily in that area. When I was growing up, players like Zidane, Ronaldinho, and Beckham were the popular players. What I liked about them was how they played, their flair, and maybe even their celebrity. I became a little bit older when Guardiola started managing Barcelona. My interest started to shift towards analyzing the game. I was interested in the subtext of the game, how the teams were set up, and I wanted to talk philosophy. What did I believe in? Did I like a 4-3-3, 4-4-2, 3-3, 3-1? Who knows? What Barcelona did during this era where I started to change how I thought about soccer was nothing short of spectacular. They won a lot, but the way they won, I had never seen before. I had seen Ronaldinho. He was a fantastic player. I would watch him for the Brazil national teams. You couldn't get a whole lot of games when I was younger in America, except for international games on ESPN. But he was so much fun to watch. But when I started growing up and thinking about the game a little bit differently, the flair wasn't enough. I wanted to understand how all the parts worked for the whole. Why did a team win? And there are some spectacular players, cough, cough, Lionel Messi, that can completely change a game. But I started to realize there were more parts to the whole. There was an idea that, a team could be completely defensive. I'd never thought about it. It was just an even, you went out there and played. There weren't multiple ways to play. If you weren't watching closely during Guardiola's reign, you have to read this book. It absolutely lays out some drama. And, in the sense of, it could be a Shakespearean play. It's just fantastic in that sense. Tiki-taka, a term that Guardiola does not like. Here in America, we have a general kindness. This word, we like this word. It's not a negative word. Tiki-taka was expressed to say pointless passing of the ball. And so when we got it in America, that we saw Guardiola's, we didn't see it as pointless, but in other contexts, it might be a negative word. But the way he played, the tiki-taka, the quick movements of the ball were fantastic. And to see a team win after they had just completely dominated like that was wonderful. I wanted to know what caused that. What were the philosophies? Why was he so passionately yelling? I'd never noticed a coach before. I saw him and I saw it was like the 12th player. And I had never thought about that before. And this book doesn't go into a lot of in-depth tactical, minutia, but it will give you some ideas and some ideas of what Cruyff wanted and what he thought and how Guardiola made that different and how Koeman made that different and Van Gaal and Enrique, all the names. And even how Mourinho made that different. You know, uh, who gonna position? Where are you positioned? Um, and a lot of the things about space. But Mourinho plays for space too. He plays it differently, but he was the polar opposite of some of these other players. It's just fantastic in the sense of starting to understand what goes through a coach's mind, what they try to push out, and sort of the torch they carry. There is no doubt that this book picks a side, and you can already guess which side that is. It's the in the name of the book. It does feel like there are some apologies and some revisionist history for things that happened. There's not a whole lot of, devil's advocate. It doesn't really tell you a whole lot of Real Madrid's point of view or other teams' point of view. It does give you a bit of Mourinho's point of view. You'll have to decide how you feel about this, but it still makes a compelling read. It still gives you a lot of information, and at least does present the other side of the argument for you at times. If nothing else, this is an important part of history that every soccer fan should know. You may look at the managers of today's top clubs and not know how, they grew together. Their philosophies and their histories have been absolutely intertwined, even if they seem different. We may be coming on a shift in the zeitgeist on soccer philosophy, as we have seen, a German school of thought that has been prevalent the past few years. You know, Coaches such as Jurgen Klopp, Hansi Flick, Thomas Tuchel, to name a few. Some gegenpressing, some different philosophies, but so there might be a shift, but it doesn't really exclude the fact that some of these names are top in management still, and that these games, it really hasn't been decided whether there's a winner or a loser, and I'm not sure if there are winners and losers. This maybe ebbs and flows might be a better way to think of it. If you read this book, you won't be disappointed because it is such an important part of soccer history. At least the past 10 years, you know, really maybe the past 40 years. This book stretches a long span. It's entertaining, it's dramatic, it brings you in the politics. You sort of understand what coaches go through in the back scene. It does some tactical battles. It's a must read.